I was assaulted by these soldiers during a night raid on Tuani, the night of my birthday actually.
Holy
I
shit.
told you, Oda organized that celebration, and then I came back to Tuani where I was staying at that point, and then was woken up by our host Sammy Harani saying that the soldiers are raiding the village, pointed guns at us. Like Basil and I had like guns like pointed at us, and they were threatening to shoot us if we wouldn't move two paces to the left or something.
Ho
Um,
Holy shit, did they
and
say
to
why,
me,
or
yeah.
or did they say
No,
why, or
no, the
just
whole
'cause they
time.
could?
No, the whole time I was really begging them to tell me what they were doing, and I was speaking to them in Hebrew and in English, asking them like, "What's the purpose of this? Like, what are you doing? Don't you see like there's children in these homes and that you're scaring them? What do you expect these Palestinian children to think of Jews and of Israelis when this is how you come into their homes?" And they wouldn't tell us anything. I think that it was maybe just practice.
Welcome back to War is Stupid, an anti-war podcast about war. My guest today is the recently promoted Director of Young Leadership and Education at the New Israel Fund. It's not on his LinkedIn yet, so it's very fresh and exciting. Welcome, Zak Witus.
Hi, Orly. It's great to be here.
Yes, I'm excited to talk to you. We're going to work our way backwards from your most recent op-ed in the forward about your recent experience at Ben Gurion Airport. So here on War is Stupid, we're here to bust myths and f- f- Ben Gurion Airport is widely perceived as, the safest place for Jews on earth. I've The extent of my interrogations there have been, do you speak Hebrew? How did you learn Hebrew? And where do your cousins live? That's your address. Like they do ask you a lot of questions before you board a plane, and I always joke like, "Oh my God, are you flirting with me?" But your experience was neither fun nor flirty.
That's true. Although it did get a little flirtatious by the end when I finally decided to relax and tried to like for my own like stress like started cracking jokes with the people. But no, it was very stressful. For the first I would say 45 minutes of the experience.
Yeah. So what happened? What went down? First, what were you doing in on the land?
Yeah, so I was leading a trip of young activists from the U.S. and from Canada on a week-long solidarity study tour, where we were meeting with different civil society activists and leaders, Israelis and Palestinians. We had a group of 15 of us, where we were traveling around the country in Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, the Negev, the Gaza envelope, Masafriata, other places. Learning firsthand about what the struggles are like there currently, and how people in the diaspora can be, more in solidarity, more in sync with the movements on the ground. And so it was actually, it's always a difficult trip. Like you're confronting the brutality of the occupation and systems of segregation within Israel proper as well. But it was also like a really inspiring trip. Partially because of mainly because of the activists on the ground, the Israelis and Palestinians, who, despite 2 years of war and 2 years of what many organizations there are calling genocide, remain like determined to fight on, to fight for a better future. But also inspiring because of like these young leaders in the diaspora who, despite some of the same stuff, in addition to divisions within American and Canadian Jewish communities, are still like wanting to be involved, wanting to go and travel and be on the ground. So it was like actually like a really positive and successful trip. And this experience, like right at the end, was I'm not gonna say in contrast with the other stuff we saw, because we saw plenty of systems of repression at play. Um, But basically, and actually, what my ordeal actually kind of began on my way to Israel. When I was getting on my flight at JFK, went to check in at the El Al desk, and put in my passport information, and immediately they're like, "Oh, you need to go talk to that person over there. Like, we have a few more questions for you." And I go over to talk to like the additional like security person, and she like puts my information into her iPad, which I can kind of see in front of me, and immediately like a column, and it turns like all red, and they're
Wow.
like, oh, okay. And so they like took my passport and started like flipping through it to see like, I guess, where I'd been traveling, and then they like put a sticker on it and like made some notes about extra checks that I was going to need to do. And yeah, I was very nervous. I was like, kind of tense.
Wow. Do you know do you know why? Is it like because you're titled from the New Israel Funds, or they had read your writing? Like, what do you know why you flashed?
I really don't know. I can only kind of guess, but yeah, I've been doing this work for like a decade now, like writing a lot. I previously like, I've spent lots of time in Israel proper and in the West Bank doing protective presence work, other activism, where I've had like soldiers like, take photos of my passport. And I haven't exactly been trying to fly under the radar with like my like advocacy. So I can only assume it's because of like, whatever kind of public profile I guess I have.
That's so interesting. Yeah, I wonder if I have that to look forward to. And and yeah, so you didn't right off the bat you didn't get a welcome home like they do on Birthright.
No, well, and so I get to the gate in JFK, and they take me into this like weirdly constructed room like next to the gate that I think only like the flights to Israel have, where there's just like, so like they're like, please come over to this room, and I'm like, where did this room come from? And I go in, and they like take all of my like my carry-on items, and they're like swabbing it for like bomb residue. They have like a machine in the back. Even got to the point where they were like, oh, we need to look inside your coffee cup to make sure there's nothing like hiding in there. And like I took off, I had my Starbucks cup. This is before the strike, don't worry. But I
Yeah.
opened up the I opened up the cup, and like she like looks inside, and we both like kind of just laugh, because it's like what are you expecting? Like, you're expecting like Hamas to be like inside the Starbucks cup? Like, what's going on? Like,
Hamasachino. Oy. And already the fact that you went to Starbucks, I guess in an airport you have fewer options, but that means that's on the BDS list. So that already they should have been like, you have Starbucks, welcome home.
yeah, right, exactly.
So ultimately, after they let you on the plane.
They let me on the plane, I like landed in Ben Gurion, had no issue at passport control. My first stop, went to the hotel in Tel Aviv. I slept for like 90 minutes. And then I rented a car to go down to Al Khair to visit my friends in Al Khair in the West Bank in Masafriata. My friend Ode, who I wrote about in the article, had been murdered by this seller Inon Levi back on July 28th. And I hadn't been to Israel or Palestine since then, and so that was like my first stop to go and to give my condolences to the community, and to give flowers to Hanadi, his widow. And it was similar to what I was saying before. Like, really, it's obviously awful. I wrote about in the piece like seeing the place where Oda was gunned down, but really felt really important and really good to be like with my friends there, and to yeah, just to be present with the community. And on the way back, I was driving with a friend who was giving me a ride back to Tel Aviv, and at the not border crossing between Israel and the West Bank, the soldier manning it also kind of like gave us some extra scrutiny. Not exactly clear why. We took our passports, and did a thorough check of the car, and was asking us who we were meeting with, and so on. So that might have also been a moment where like there was some kind of flag that had been raised. But anyway, I'm getting back to I wanted to like sort of set the stage with these other instances, because then I get to Ben Gurion, leaving after being in Israel Palestine for about 2 weeks. the initial security check, like, I go right through, like, it was fine. They asked me, like, "Where did you learn Hebrew? How do
Mhm.
you celebrate Hanukkah?" I'm like, "I guess we light the candles."
Yeah.
But then when I got to the gate, I was standing there with my colleague Hannah Barg, who happened to be on the same flight as me, and they said, Zachary Witus, like, please come to the gate. I'm like, oh, here we go, and they like took my passport um, and yeah, and then I was like, yeah, interrogated for like the next hour. Um, yeah.
Wow, so what did they ask?
Yeah, so this security agent like pulled me to the side, and she started asking me more about the New Israel Fund. What specifically does NIF stand for? What are our political beliefs? And I was like, well, we believe in human rights for all people. We believe in
Uh-oh.
safety and yeah. um, and she said, "Well, we looked through your checked bag, and we found some, political messaging, some political materials that were quite strong," was the word she used. And she said, "I thought they were very one-sided." And I was like, "I don't agree with that characterization." And she was like, "Well, you had some stuff in there about a specific politician." And I'm like, it felt like very coy. I was like, yeah, there was a shirt that said "fuck Ben Gurion." Like, we don't need to.
Yeah, let's
I'm
say
like,
we have the visual aids. I have the
yeah,
sticker, which I didn't realize how lucky I was that it was successfully smuggled out of Israel.
yeah, right. And she's like asking me about this, and she said, what about the? No, there's some other stickers too. This is another one from Mechaskim and F grantee. Um,
Amazing.
it's
I need that
v-
one.
very apropos. And then
It says
okay,
folklore if you're listening. And Anis
yeah,
Malaniga, I'm a proud leftist. Oh, yeah,
yeah.
this is really dangerous shit.
I mean, look, it's pink. I mean, that's very intimidating and
Yeah.
scary. And then the two other and they were asking me, but they said, "Oh, we found some books in there." Like the books were also like one-sided and like anti-Israel. And so there's this one book, Daybreak in Gaza, which is a collection of stories, edited by Mahmoud Muna and Matthew Teller. Mahmoud Muna is one of the co-owners of the Educational Bookshop in East Jerusalem, who we had met with during the trip. And then there was also this graphic novel called Jerusalem, um, and she's like asking me about like why I have these books, and I was like, well, I like to read and like educate myself. By the way, is there anything illegal about having these? She said, "Oh no, it's just a check." I was like, okay.
Wow.
um, and then started to ask me about had I been or where did I get the books? Had I been to across the border in the West Bank? And I didn't say this, but I was like, I wish it was a border, but
Yeah.
the Israeli authorities love to like posit that there's a border here when it serves them. So who had I met with in the West Bank? And I asked, I was like, why is that relevant? And she said, oh, first names will be fine. And so I was like, we met with Muhammad and Fatima, and they're like, okay. And then they took me to so after that they took me to this like interrogation room with additional like equipment to scan my belongings, sort of like walked me away from the gate. And as I'm walking away from the gate, my colleague Hannah, who also works at NIF, she texts our executive director in Israel, who then gets in contact with the Human Rights Defenders Fund. So I have like this like line to like these like lawyers who are like unbeknownst to me like on standby, should I need them, which is a huge privilege, but actually something that we do for Israeli and Palestinian activists who are in similar situations or being detained or what have you. So they take me to this other room, and they take my backpack. They're like emptying out my whole backpack, like putting everything through the scanners and swabbing everything for like bomb residue. They took my phone and they put my phone in this machine, and it like some kind of like buzzer or something like goes off, which like made me really nervous because I was like, what the fuck? Like that's
Yeah.
not, I'm like, what's, I said in Hebrew, I'm like, is there a problem? Like, what's going on? Like, don't fucking like entrap me with this. Like, this is my phone. There's nothing wrong with it. And I don't know, but immediately they were like, oh no, it's fine, whatever. Where did you get, they started asking me, where'd you get your phone? How long have you had your phone? I'm like, I think I got it from Verizon
Yeah.
like 2 years ago.
It's an
Like, I don't know.
iPhone 15, so it's already two behind. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and they're going through the stuff in my backpack. I had a copy of Say Nothing, this book about the troubles and about in Ireland and about the IRA, and but they're like flipping through it, and like they didn't ask me any questions about that. I also had the latest copy of Dissent magazine. It was like the authoritarianism and resistance issue. It didn't seem to register to them at all. Like I was like, surely they will ask me about like this. It was nothing. They take my notebook, they're like flipping through it. They didn't, it felt very like stupid, like security check. And there was like 5 agents in the room with me. One of them's like on the phone with somebody
Oh
elsewhere
my
the whole
gosh.
time. Like I have no idea what was like being communicated there. They x-rayed me, like they like put me through an x-ray machine and like had me go in multiple like positions. At a certain point, like I said, like I just decided to like relax. It might be like cringe millennial of me, but I was thinking about the line from Dune about
Fear is
fear
the
is the
mind
mind.
killer.
Yeah, and so I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna relax, and eventually the guy, there's some delay with like the X-ray machine, like it wasn't powering up properly or something like that. And so he started asking me like, oh, where are you from? I'm like, oh, I'm from New York. He's like, oh, I'd love to visit New York one day. I'm like, yeah, greatest city in the world. He's like, what do you like to do in New York? I'm like, going to comedy shows, like one of my favorite things. He's like, oh, like I'd love to come. And I was like, oh, by the way, like what time is it? He's like, oh, you're worried about your flight. Don't worry, the plane will wait for you. And I was like, oh, that's nice. Usually you have to like, that never happens. And he's like, yeah, I usually have to pay extra for that. And he starts like patting me down. He's like patting down my legs and stuff. I'm like, oh, it feels kind of nice. Like, you don't need to stop. It's all right. And so by the end, I was like we were having a good time. But
Thanks for the massage.
yeah.
That is fascinating. So, did it feel like a humiliation ritual or trying to scare you? Like, I just thinking like five dudes, that's a whole basketball team, or 5 people, like
There's men and
interrogating.
women. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, interrogating one person. So it sounds like the person who found the stickers and like mentioned the politician was like a true believer. Or because so for people who don't know, who is Itamar Ben Gvir, for the people who haven't been billing him for their therapy for the past 3 years, like I have.
Yeah. Yeah. Itamar Ben Gvir is the Minister of National Security. And he's been in government since the beginning of 2023. And so he's he's the head of the police. And he is far right, like openly like Jewish supremacist, very, very open in his anti-Palestinian racism. And under this Netanyahu government has been really empowered to crack down even harder than Israeli governments before were cracking down on Palestinians in the West Bank, but also in Palestinians in Israeli prisons, and also Palestinian citizens of Israel.
Yeah, he is so far right that he was even too racist for the IDF. Like he wasn't conscripted as a teenager because he was like a convicted insider to terrorism. Like, and then now he's in charge of the police, and Netanyahu has to cater to him to keep the coalition together. It's like objectively one of the worst things to happen to humanity. So let's just say this: fuck Ben Gvir is the nicest thing you can say about him.
It's very low hanging fruit. I mean,
Yeah.
he's
Speaking of
yeah.
hanging, he's the dude who was wearing the noose pins.
Yeah, right. He's sort of like there's like systemic like racism built into the occupation, like in within Israel, and he's sort of like the kind of like grotesque, sort of like obvious like expression of it. The way that like it's very similar to like the way that far right politicians in the US, like, who just openly say the racist thing now and don't even try to, like, hide it the way that they might have, like, 10, 15 years ago. Um, yeah, there's really nothing, like, redeemable about this character. Like, he is totally beyond the pale. Yeah.
And so, yeah, so of the five people interrogating you, yeah, one seems serious, one seems friendly. I can't help but think that this is just seems like an insane use of resources.
Yeah, absolutely. It's hard to say, like, what the intention was exactly behind it. I think that they want to intimidate, and harass and, like, deter people like you and me who believe in, the need for Israelis to feel safe and secure, but also believe in the need for Palestinians to have the same thing and for Palestinians to be free. Like, there must be some awareness that there are, growing numbers, swelling numbers of American Jews and Americans around the world who, recognize that they have privileged access to this place and they have a special kind of power to, like, take action on the ground. I was the whole time I was very cognizant of the fact that there were these two Jewish women who had been deported after participating in the olive harvest, the Palestinian olive harvest, with an organization called Rabbis for Human Rights, and they were detained in the West Bank while they were picking olives, and then they went through an expedited deportation process, and then they were banned for 10 years from going to Israel. I don't know of another instance of anything like this happening. And supposedly they had violated, like, what's called a closed military zone. Basically, the IDF can just, like, declare any area of the West Bank it wants to be a closed military zone and say, like, nobody can go here. But in practice, it's used so arbitrarily just to, like, control the movement of people. And these women say that they didn't even know that it had been declared because, like, there's, like, maybe a map on a soldier's phone that, like, shows you where it is, but, like, it's not, like, at all obvious in the landscape. But the fact that these, just a few weeks before this little ordeal that I had to go through happened, these women were banned. Like, it was that was the scariest part for me, because like, despite despite everything, despite, like, all of the horrors and, like, the violence that I've seen and experienced myself, in Israel and in the West Bank, I really love the place and I really love the people, and the way that I've done anti-occupation work has always been rooted in the on the ground movements, and the idea that, like, I wouldn't be able to go back to be with my friends and to, like, take action there is like a devastating prospect. And so that was really scary to me. And still now, like, as I'm hoping to go back in July to lead, like, a similar kind of program, as I just did. And yeah, I don't know if they're going to let me in. And clearly, like, this little bit of, like, harassment is designed to, like, make me feel that way and to make me question, oh, is it really worth it to, like, go through this and so on. But my answer is that we have to keep, like, pushing the envelope because we otherwise we just let them win and we let them scare us.
Yeah, I'd love to hear more about what your work looks like on the ground. Primarily, like, what do you think people on the right don't understand about the reality of life in Israel, on Israel Palestine, and what do you think people on the left don't understand?
In the US?
Yes.
I mean, I think people who don't have never been there have a very, like, abstracted and very, like, simplified view of what it's like. I mean, I can speak from my own, like, experience. Like, I only went there for the first time in 2018, and I thought that I had, like, read a lot about the place, and I thought that I had understood a lot through that reading. And I definitely had, like, a leftist perspective. But I think it took, like, going there and living there and doing, like, volunteer work there for 5 months, through this program called activism, which is this service learning program based on the principle that, everyone deserves the right to self-determination in the places that they call home. And I think that I didn't, at some level, understand the level of the brutality. Like, when you see it firsthand, the way that people can be cruel to others, it hits really, really differently. But I also didn't really understand the extent to which Israelis and Palestinians, not enough, but many are like working together in these movements. That my time there, I was based in Jerusalem, and I got to know these like incredibly committed Israeli activists and Palestinian activists who are part of like what you can call the Israeli left and partners in Palestine. It's relatively small, like we shouldn't overstate it, but it's really powerful and it's a really vibrant movement, and they're some of the most committed, principled people that I know. And so I think a lot of, I think that I think in response to the immense dehumanization of Palestinians by the Israeli government, by the American government, like within U.S. media, I do see like a tendency in some circles in the U.S. that dehumanizes Israelis as a kind of like reaction, and it's kind of to my mind it's kind of like a tit for tat thing, and I don't think I don't think that is helpful. I think on the right there's like these growing like conspiracy theories about like Jewish control and Israeli control of American politics, and you hear these narratives about like how the Israeli government like allowed October 7th to occur, really like disturbing stuff. And to be sure, there's like lots of questions about how October 7th did happen and how why it took the IDF so long to respond. When I was in Tel Aviv, I was part of a demonstration, pretty like centrist, center left demonstration that was calling for a commission of inquiry into October 7th. And we met with Rabbi Avi Dabush, who's the head of Rabbis for Human Rights, who lives in kibbutz Nirim and survived the Hamas assault there. And he described the hours that it took for the IDF to respond and come to and come to the kibbutz. And that wasn't the only place where there was really delayed response. And so there are questions about that, but I think the right wing, maybe also on the left, but certainly on the right, it's led to like these conspiracy theories. Yeah, I think I think the real reasons are a lot more basic, which was that the IDF was too busy protecting settlers in the West Bank because of Ben Gurion and Smotrich. Um, and you know, I think. And I think going into this next period, we have 3 more years of Trump in the White House, it seems, in the United States. And I think that our movements have to really ask themselves, and here I'm speaking especially about like the Jewish left, which is the part of the left that I feel most in touch with in a personal way. We have to ask ourselves like where are our leverage points, like where can we be most involved and most effective, and so long as you have a president who is buddy buddy with Netanyahu, and isn't going to impose any kind of restrictions on the ethnic cleansing that we're seeing in the West Bank, the kinds of like electoral appeals or sort of like capital P political work that we can do in the U.S. is really constrained. Meanwhile, like the ethnic cleansing in the West Bank is only accelerating, and I saw that firsthand. So to my mind, like what we in the Jewish left should really be thinking about is how we can be on the ground, building more relationships and taking direct action with our, in solidarity with our Israeli and Palestinian partners. Whether that's like a trip that's like 10 days long, 3 months long, a year. I think that is some of the most effective work, and I know from my own experience that it can light a fire in you and can propel you in this movement for much longer than I would say like many of the actions can in the U.S. context. Not to say that that's not also important. Like there is of course really important work to do stateside, but to me this next period, these next 3 years, I think it really has to be focused on being on the ground and really being there.
Yes. So I feel for people who say that being on the ground is like inherently a betrayal of Palestinian rights, that's just like the BDS exceptionalist view. The Palestinians you speak to who are actually there say, no, that's not the case. Please come.
I'm not even sure that that's really the position of BDS. I think if I understand correctly, maybe it's changed. The BDS movement has certain parameters that they set for people who want to go and be on the ground. But it's not. I don't believe it's the case that they say, "Oh, don't come to visit Palestine." I think they just want people to do it in a way that's aligned with their principles. Now, I have my own issues with the kind of hierarchy of the BDS movement. But I mean, I can say for the Palestinian communities that I feel most connected with in Masafer Yatta in the West Bank, in these rural parts of the occupied West Bank, that they need people, that they are asking for people to come and to stand with them and to serve as a protective presence, and to then go home and to amplify their causes to the world. There's no room for purity politics there. Like there's too much at stake.
Yeah, I'd love to hear about your origin story, how you came into this work that is, yeah, neither easy nor popular.
My origin story. So I'm originally from Metro Detroit, born in Evanston, Illinois, but yeah, grew up in Metro Detroit. Little suburb called Huntington Woods outside, on 10 Mile. If Detroit starts at 8 Mile, we're at 10, between 10 and 11. And Israel was not a big topic within my household. I don't remember anybody identifying as like Zionist growing up. I would say there was like an ambient kind of like pro-Israel atmosphere. We don't have any like close family in Israel, but I do have a distinct memory of the 2004 presidential election when I was in fifth grade. And, my family are like, Democrats. And my mom gave me a pin to put on my backpack that said, John Kerry stands with Israel. Um, and so even as I'm like, I don't remember strong messaging about Israel as a kid, there was like that just assumption that like, Kerry, Democrat, like Israel stands with Israel, stands with the Jews, stands with so we're with Kerry. Um, and I remember it was in like a reform shul, and there was two flags in the bima, the Israeli flag and the American flag. And the idea that you would go on birthright one day, and that was definitely present. The friends who I went to summer camp with, um, who went to the Jewish day school, they were much more kind of rah-rah, like pro-Israel, much more, I would say much more like ideological, about Israel in a way that like um I didn't have strong feelings about as a kid, like in middle school and high school. But I definitely remember not feeling the same way that they did. And several of the people who I went on this summer camp trip to Alaska with, several of them like who were from the day school went on to join the IDF, and one of them had like an illustrious career, like as a soldier and officer. And I don't know all what he did, but um, but for me, like in going into high school and into college, I definitely was like tracking to the left. My mom is like something of an activist, and would be involved in like really local community things, like the playground issue, or there's like a bond issue coming up on the local ballot. She would be like organizing around that. And but I would say she's a bit more center left, kind of like Clintonian Democrat. Not to put words in your mouth, Mom, if you're listening to this. My dad is the one who I think got more of my political ideology from. He was definitely on like the Marxist side of Democrat. I remember like as a kid, I had a Lego set. And there was like, you could like build the Legos on this like big red square. And my dad named each of my Lego figurines after famous communists. So there was like Rosa Luxemburg and Trotsky and Stalin, and so I got that early like
That's so
communist
cute.
kind of,
I
yeah.
want the Emma Goldman Lego set for Hanukkah.
Yeah. Yeah, someone should make that. But so anyway, like started like becoming much more interested in realizing that I hadn't been really educated about what the United States had really been up to in the world. And started reading a lot of like Noam Chomsky. Like my buddy Charlie like was like feeding me like manufacturing consent, and the Fateful Triangle, and these different like Chomsky books, which like to me was like the scales falling from my eyes. Like it was, yeah, that was pivotal for me. Um, and then went to college at the University of Michigan. Took the Arab-Israeli conflict class with Victor Lieberman, which is like this big lecture hall class that is kind of a big deal. And all of the Jews are in there, and there was also definitely a lot of like Arab students. But like I just remember looking around and being like, all of the Jewish fraternities and sororities are like sitting like sitting here. I was not in any of those. But and then there was like a big BDS push at Michigan several of the years there. But I lived in a house my sophomore year with it was mostly other Jewish kids, and the BDS push on campus really forced me and forced me and my friends to like clarify like what we really thought, and forced like really important conversations, about the occupation, about Palestinian rights, and forced it to like think more about what's really going on, and I started to really focus on Israel Palestine, because I felt like because of my community, I had like a closer tie there than I did to like issues of like American dirty wars in Latin America or in Southeast Asia or something like that. This felt like a place where I could actually maybe have some traction. But it had never been, so started writing a lot for the Michigan Daily, like, the student newspaper there, writing columns, about, among other things, about the occupation. And I remember looking back, I didn't have this language at the time, but I was really looking for points of like moral clarity amidst everything else. Like as I was like trying to like, read Rashid Khalidi and read like Benny Morris and like, get the deeper history. I also like had the drive to like, yeah, find like the thing that I can say, okay, well, no matter who started this war or who rejected this peace agreement, like we can say that we can have a clear moral judgment about this one thing. And so like, there was one piece that I remember that I wrote about punitive home demolitions, right? The practice of the Israeli government destroying the homes of people suspected of terrorism. So they're destroying the home that also is the home of like the suspected terrorists, like children and like mother and like cousins. And to me, like it doesn't take any great like moral philosophy to say that like that's wrong, that you shouldn't punish a kid or a spouse because of something that this man may have done, who hasn't even like stood trial for his alleged crimes. And then I wanted to. I'd never been to Israel or Palestine. I graduated Michigan in 2016 and worked in a Jewish deli in Ann Arbor, Zingerman's, which was still, no shade time IF, but like still one of the best like work experiences I've had working at Zingerman's. But so I had a friend who did this program, Akvad, which I mentioned before. And I was so skeptical of it. I remember asking my friend Ariel, like, isn't this just like another birthright-esque trip that you're really just going to, party on the beach in Tel Aviv and to, go on all of like the rides for young Jews and to hook up with whoever. And she was like, Mamash low, like that is
Yeah.
not the case. Um, and like you're doing real work with Palestinians, with Israelis. It's the real deal. And I remember talking to the director of Akvat at the time, or the founder. I don't know if he was the director at that point. Co-founder Daniel Roth, and I was sharing some of these concerns with him, and he said to me, well, have you ever thought about leveraging your privilege? And at that time, I think it was maybe like a newer idea to me, as like a recent college graduate. Maybe I was slow on the uptake, I don't know, um, but I was like, oh, that's an interesting that's an interesting point. And that's pretty much been like my like modus operandi like ever since.
That's amazing and impressive that your first time there was like in the capacity as an activist. So like right from the get-go, you were meeting people that the people organizing other trips that wouldn't have wanted you to meet. And I had Sam Stein on the show, and he talked about Ahvad Amim and Masefer Yatta. I'm so sorry for your loss. I'd love to talk more about Auda if you have any stories you want to share. Sam had a very funny story about bonding over circumcision, which is beautiful. It's yet and just underlines the point we're more alike than we are different.
Yeah. I mean, what can I say about Ode? I met him. I'd met him during my first trip in 2018, and I don't think he remembered me from that point. We did during Akfa, we did a trip to the south. We spent a night in Umm He's my age. We're the same age, and so at that point, I guess I would have been like 24, and he would have also been 24. But at that point, was already such a charismatic leader. Charismatic is maybe even the wrong word. He's just very charming and warm and sweet, and was welcomed our big group into the village and hosted us, and brought out like this amazing meal for us. And it was like the winter, and it was cold and rainy, and we like went into like one of the buildings there, and these are very like humble structures with like made with like breeze blocks and like tin roofs and stuff like that. But we were sort of all like, cozied up like under some like warm blankets and things, and he was just like sharing stories, and was immediately kind of like a very just like welcoming, sweet presence. And but I really got to know him during Hinenu, this protective presence project that I did through the Center for Jewish Nonviolence in the spring of 2022, where I lived in Umm as well as some other villages in the South of Brown Hills in Masafriata. And that's where I really got to know Oded and the rest of the community. And he just had such an amazing sense of humor. We have these like really kind of like shitty cars that we used during the program that like CJV had like bought on the cheap for us, and
With
totally
which
understandable.
license plates did you get the Israeli license plates? I
These were
learned about
Israeli
that from
license
Sam.
plates.
Yeah.
Yeah. They had the Israeli plates. Um, but like, these cars over the years have been like taken by the police. At one point, like people were like pretty sure that one of these cars was bugged. And there was one day where like one of us was like picking up Ode from Umm and he like pops into the car and immediately starts like loudly praising the police, like, wow, they do such a great job. Like, they're always respectful. They're always looking out for us. And wow, I love the police. Knowing that he's like like likely being like recorded. And I was there during my birthday, in March 2022. And I've been having like kind of a hard time. I think that week, my partner and I we were being like forced to move earlier than we thought from our place. We lived in Asheville, North Carolina at the time, and it was very stressful to me that like she was gonna have to move us while I was like over here. But Oda and some of the other guys like went into the city, went into Yatta, and like got me this cake that had like it was like a face cake, and it had like my face on it, making like a funny expression. And he like had bought all this chicken and did like a big, we call it meat pit, but like it's a big barbecue basically. Traditionally it's like you take a big thing of meat and like you bake it in like you barbecue it like in a pit in the ground. But um and so he like there's this photo I have of him that I posted shortly after he was killed, of him like uh in Yatta with like a big bag of chicken like on the scale, and it says like like 5 pounds of chicken or whatever. And it just goes to show like what a host he was, and what a loving, passionate guy who just deeply believed in everybody's humanity. And um was the absolute antithesis to what the Jewish supremacists like settlers are. These people who believe in cruelty and who have dehumanized the other. Like Oda and his community are the exact opposite. Um, like when I was there this in November, we were talking with Eid Hathleen, Oda's cousin, and he's talking about Inon, and he like he said, he's obviously very upset, and he's like talking about him, and he lets out like the smallest like curse, like he says, like he calls him like this piece of gum on his shoe or something, like very mild, and then like apologizes right after,
Well,
like
for the man who
because
murdered his
yeah,
cousin.
yeah, and it's just like again, they're the exact opposite. Like even this person, like they don't want to hate him. I that that I don't I struggle with that.
Well, yeah. Yeah. While living in the West Bank, what were your experiences with settlers, people who claim to be operating in your best interest as a Jewish person for your benefit?
Yeah, with the settlers, I mean, I had a lot of run-ins with Yinon Levi, with the man who murdered Auda,
Oh my God.
around Susia and around the village of Zenuta, which is close to the Metarim settlement and the Metarim farming outpost, which Yinon created with I think in cooperation with another settler who I encountered several times, Eli Federman, both of whom were sanctioned internationally for their violence. And it was like daily encounters. We would be going accompanying shepherds as they were trying to like graze their flocks on their land, and the settlers would bring their flocks, and then we'd like, at the behest of our Palestinian partners, like call the police to come and try to like adjudicate the matter. And then sometimes it was Enon, sometimes it was one of Enon's like little underlings. But Enon would show up like to help like speak to the police, and he was clearly like the organizer and the ringleader. And so it's sort of like like daily little battles over like grazing access. Lee Fetterman would come out with his dog, with his German Shepherd, and like try to like intimidate people. He once sicked his dog on Basel Adara, the co-director of No Other Land, which won the Oscar last year, and which I knew about. And so whenever I would see Ellie with his dog, it was obviously very frightening. And
Oh my God,
you
we'll
know,
have like white people on here who are like, I draw the line at weaponizing dogs. Like
yeah,
that's yeah, you
yeah,
could do
right.
ethnic cleansing, but to implicate a dog in your crimes, how dare you?
Yeah, I mean, there is like another level of like of cruelty of that. It's like, yeah,
Yeah, it's like
um,
cops on horses. Like, why'd you have to get them involved?
right. They didn't do anything. They didn't ask for this. No, yeah. And really saw, and most of my interactions though were actually with soldiers. I was assaulted by these soldiers during a night raid on Tuani, the night after my, like the night of my birthday, actually.
Holy
Like I
shit.
told you, like Oda, like organized that celebration, and then I came back to Tuani, where I was staying at that point, and then was woken up by our host Sammy Harani, like after like an hour or something, saying that the soldiers are raiding the village. And so we came out to like film them and to like ask them what's going on. And when we insisted on continuing to film them, the soldiers assaulted me and assaulted several of the other Jewish activists. One guy like tried to take my camera and like bear hugged me, and then took his gun and like struck me in my leg and in my arm with it. Tackled my friend Maya to the ground, tackled Asher, this like 60-year-old Canadian linguistics professor, like tackled him. Um, Pointed guns at us. Like Basel and I had like guns like pointed at us, and they were threatening to shoot us if we wouldn't move two paces to the left or something. Um, and um,
Holy shit. Did they
and
say
to
why
me,
or,
to yeah.
or did they say
No,
why or
no,
just
the whole
because they
time.
could?
No, the whole time I was really begging them to tell me what they were doing, and I was speaking to them in Hebrew and in English, asking them like, "What's the purpose of this? Like, what are you doing? Don't you see like there's children in these homes and that you're scaring them? What do you expect these Palestinian children to think of Jews and of Israelis when this is how you come into their homes?" And they wouldn't tell us anything. I think that it was maybe just practice. I think it might have just been an exercise for them. At one point, they started to like set up as if they were going to like raid this health clinic that like was empty, and then they like stopped. So like it made it kind of seem like it was maybe just like practice. Um, They handcuffed Nasser Adra, Bossel's father, who was recently detained for a bit by the military. They handcuffed him, but then like left him. Like they didn't take him or anything. They just handcuffed him and left him. So I think it was just, it's part of this thing that, the former soldiers in Breaking the Silence, the anti-occupation group talk about, which is part of what the IDF does is just make their presence felt and to, kind of constantly remind Palestinians who the boss is. This is a system of domination and, sometimes it's more effective to just intimidate people than to like use the even more aggressive forms of violence. And so I think it was practice. I think it was just making their presence felt.
That's devastating. And then I think back, that's what someone from Michigan or I grew up with in Toronto did on their gap year. They're like, I'm not ready to go to college yet, so they joined the IDF. Like,
Yeah. Right.
is that a
Yeah.
system that leads to cooperation and partnership and mutual respect? Like, what world is that establishing?
Yeah. Um, Yeah, no, it's establishing the world that we live in, where Israel, the Israeli government like dominates Palestinians, where like this is like an old insight that Israeli leftists have been saying since the beginning of the occupation, where there's like I can't remember the exact phrase, where there's repression, like there's resistance. Like nobody wants to live under these conditions forever. And you know and unfortunately we're still struggling to make this point. Both our Israeli partners within Israel, but I think also in the US context, that about like how October 7th like really happened. And obviously it goes without saying like nothing excuses the atrocities of October 7th, but there is also a context for it, and the context is over 50 years of military occupation and over a decade of siege of Gaza. The kind of like you know, living by the sword and like the security through military force paradigm that Netanyahu sort of expresses. But honestly, like Israeli political parties on the center and on the center left also espouse like that doesn't work. There is no military solution, and there is no path for long term Israeli security that doesn't go through diplomacy. And so we really have to. I think if we really want Jewish safety, we have to understand that Palestinian liberation is a inextricable part of that. And it's like it's not because we can't phrase it in terms of human rights, because like when other concerns like are raised, like the human rights one like immediately falls in the calculus. It's actually just a necessity for like Jewish and like Israeli self-interest, legitimate self-interest for security. Um, but unfortunately, like that change of mindset is still a struggle, and I think it's going to continue to be a struggle, like within Israel. Maybe in the American Jewish community, we've actually made a lot more progress there. But I think still, like, there's like a lot of work to do to yeah, actually understand like how we got here and what could be different.
Yes, and how can we help as we wind down? Who are people we can support? How can we plug in to be part of the solution, not part of the problem?
Yeah, in my capacity as the director, as you said, recently promoted director of young leadership
Yay.
and education at NIF, we have a number of programs that will take people to Israel Palestine to learn and to take action. Also, programs stateside and community stateside that are connecting with activists from on the ground. I think it's about using your privilege and being ready to make sacrifices to be in solidarity with the people who have the most at stake, who are Israelis and Palestinians who really live there. And I think we have to have when we're building our strategies, we have to continue to like center those the insights and the stories of the progressives in the land, and you know and even beyond NAF, there's lots of other vehicles for going over there and learning and taking action. And I think that there is no substitute. If you're somebody who's been like organizing and mobilizing stateside, and you've never been to Israel Palestine, or you've been once for a short while, like I think you need to go again. I think you need to go again and really immerse yourself in these movements for whatever stretch of time you can. I know people have like school and have work and stuff, and not everybody has the flexibility, but I think being there and building like those direct relationships with the leaders on the ground and seeing that it's like a real place. Like,
Mhm.
one thing that I think about with the study tours, the solidarity study tours that I lead, is that we spend so much time like really looking into the shadow, and into like the toughest aspects of the place. And I worry sometimes that it can be alienating, or it can repel people, like, oh, it's so fucked up, like I need to go somewhere else. Like, you also have to see like the beauty of the place, and that may sound strange to like a US audience, because we're so focused on the images, which are real images and deserve our attention, of the brutality in Gaza and other places, and the carnage of October 7th. But amidst all of that, people are having weddings and celebrations and having barbecues, and like there's a vibrancy also, and a really life affirming part of life that exists there as it exists everywhere. And I think if we only engage with it as a abstraction, or only through our phones and through the horrors, like we risk becoming alienated and jaded. When you're there, you will see like the beautiful parts as well, and because of like things like Birthright, and where you only focus on, oh,
Mhm.
how great the beach in Tel Aviv is and how awesome the restaurants are, and like that can sound cringe, and like we don't need more of that. But I think that like you have to I think that you have to like see the positive things that are there, and um that I think that's what's gonna keep us connected in the long term, and that's what's gonna ultimately like sustain us in this work, I think.
Yeah, that's beautiful. You have to be reminded what you are fighting for,
Yeah.
and not just be, yeah, wrapped up in the fight itself. And I really want to try that meat pit. That sounds really fun.
Yalla, let's go. Let's do it.
Yeah,
I'm sure they
exactly.
I'm sure they'd love to have us. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, I am. I I thank you so much for having, yeah, the moral clarity that you were looking for in college, and yeah, and doing the work both here and there. I'm really grateful for your time, and both these harrowing stories, and a reminder that there are, yeah, of the beautiful parts. Like, it's interesting. I'm torn because I know, yeah, like I need to go back, a to see my family, and b to meet the people. I haven't been since 2022, and yeah, and I know I will be, because it's an inextricable part of my life and my family. So can't focus solely on the brutality.
Absolutely. As I don't have to tell you, like all of the amazing Palestinian and Israeli comedians. I think there'll be some like great
Yes,
some great conversations, some great guests for War is Stupid for you to connect with over there.
exactly. That'll
I
be
think one
so
thing,
fun.
yeah. No, and I know we have to stop soon, but like, I think one thing that really actually unites Jews and Palestinians is the sense of like dark humor and like gallows humor. Like it's pretty incredible, like how dark like people can get with their jokes over there. So it's like
I
it's really
love that.
ripe, I think, for you. Yeah.
Do you have any examples, or I'll have to experience it myself?
Man, Any examples of the dark humor?
Or I know it's
Mm,
hard on the spot at parties when people ask me, "Oh, you're a comedian, tell me a joke." I'm like, "No, I can't give it away for free." So then
one memory that stands out is I was on in 2018 I was on a tour of East Jerusalem with this organization Iramim, learning about what the occupation looks like in East Jerusalem. And the guide like kept like cracking these jokes. And and I said like, I commented him like you have a very like dark sense of humor. Like I think I was like, what's that about or something? And he's like, he paused for a second. He's like, well, the reality is really dark and the humor helps. So not exactly a joke, but like maybe
amen, yeah,
an explanation.
philosophy.
Yeah,
And which is a good seg. I want to plug if you're listening to this and you haven't seen Coexistence My Ass yet. That's amazing. That's yeah, Noam Schuster, Eliassi. I was gonna interview her, but then she got too big. She got too busy and is having a baby. So I'm really happy for her. So I guess I'll have to follow her in person. I'll have to go to Neve Shalom. I've never been, and it sounds like the way it should be.
absolutely. Yeah, and Orly, when you're ready to book your tickets over there, let me know, and I can, however, I can be helpful, connect you with folks and opportunities, and if we're there at the same time, maybe we can go to Mustafa Yachts together, or go to an action together. I think that'd be great.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And yay, I'm
Yeah,
gonna.
thank you. This was a pleasure. I'm a huge fan of your work and of your podcast. Um, yeah, like I said, like the humor, like you have to have the humor, or else like you just you just cry all the time.
Exactly. Oh,
Yeah,
thank you. I was gonna stop recording, but no, I'm leaving those compliments in. This is so I'll come back to it.
yeah,
Thank you for listening and or watching War is Stupid, an anti-war podcast about war. Please subscribe, rate and review, tell your dads. We'll see you next time.